This is Bedford Pilgrims Housing Association, BPHA. Founded in Bedford in 1990, they currently employ around 350 people and own more than 18,000 homes. They're a not-for-profit distribution organisation with all of the tax benefits which that bestows. In 2018, their CEO, Kevin Bolt, earned £225,000. Their stated goal? To create places where everyone feels proud to live. This is one of BPHA's many tower blocks, and I live in a tower block like this one. It's safe to say that I'm not proud to live in my tower block. The first problem is BPHA's tenant admission policy and screening process. This building has been designated social housing. My experience of what that means in practice is that many of the people living in my building are unemployed and antisocial. They smoke, bleed, spit, vomit, urinate and even defecate in the lifts and on the landings. They also vandalise, leave their rubbish wherever they like, and fly tip. They play loud music at all hours, and they keep barking dogs that crap on the grass. I hope you can appreciate how antisocial behaviour like this destroys the quality of life of the decent human beings whose homes are in this building. The second problem is that BPHA have been very reluctant to police the antisocial behaviour which their tenants bring to all of us. This popular fly tipping area is just outside the front door of the building and just under a BPHA security camera. Yet BPHA won't use security camera footage to find and punish the culprits, preferring instead to pass on the costs of disposal to the residents in the service charge. This man has been my neighbour for about a decade. He's always been an antisocial neighbour. In the years before his brother died, they would argue loud and late and often fight in the corridor. As his neighbour, I was privileged with a front row seat. He'll spend his days in the boozer, and in recent years, on his way home, will find himself doubly incontinent. He'd leave a trail from the front door of the building into the lifts and down the corridors to his flat. You could smell if he'd been around recently as soon as you opened the front door of the building. He'd make no attempts to clean up except to remove the evidence that would incriminate him. From within my own flat, the smell of his excrement was disgusting. Despite my constant pestering and complaining, BPHA seemed to me to do nothing for at least the first half of this 3-year period. This is not the only tenant to routinely urinate in public places. They also totally refused to do anything in way of compensation for me, reduction of service charge, or anything at all to compensate me for the horror of living like this. And they flatly denied that they were in breach of the terms of my leaseholder agreement with them to keep the building clean and in good order. As well as all these antisocial behaviours poorly policed by BPHA, there's been drug dealing. A drug dealer has lived in a flat in this building for a long time, and I know that BPHA knew about it, and he continued to live there. That brought its share of undesirables, fights and so on, and the smell of pot was everywhere. Third problem, building maintenance and degradation. The building takes a hammering from the cretins who live here, and maintenance and repairs are either not done at all or are done very poorly, and over time that process has degraded the building to be far uglier, grimmer and less valuable. The front door has not been varnished since the day it was installed several decades ago. The plasterwork in communal areas has been damaged badly and either not repaired at all or repaired dreadfully. Look at this seamless colour matching. Whenever anything old is replaced by something new, it's done poorly and the remnants are not cleaned away. Here's a fairly trivial example. They took down the floor numbering signs and put up new ones, but just left the glue globs of the old ones in place. Absolute minimum effort. And really, why was this done at all? What was wrong with the old sign? Here's what I think the answer is. Branding. Idiots. BPHA needed to give workmen access to flat number 22, so for a while there was a key box installed which builders knew the combination to they could get the key to the flat and let themselves in. Well, when they finished they removed the box, and this is how they left it. No attempt to fill in the holes. They couldn't even be bothered to sweep away the brick dust, and neither could the cleaners. Since then, it's been 9 months. This is how it sits today. Here they've replaced old corridor lights with new ones, and not even bothered to wipe the grime from where the old fitting used to be. There's an area like this on every landing. It's where the fire exit signs used to be stuck, but over time they've either fallen off or cretins have ripped them off. And this is what's left behind, and this is what we live with. This steel trunking was installed a few years ago to connect up a fire panel, and I don't doubt that it has to be made of metal to meet fire regulations, but it's not really a sympathetic or aesthetic installation, is it? Any new wiring is done on the surface in plastic conduit. Decades ago the corridors had smooth, clean lines. Now they look more like submarines than dwellings. This is how you erode a building, how you damage the quality of life of those people who live there, and how you set expectations. If it was pristine, people might try to keep it pristine. It's not, and so it's easier to push it downhill. The fourth problem is that whilst services have got worse over the years, the costs have gone up far more than inflation. The first service problem I'll talk about is rubbish. Like most tower blocks, this block has a rubbish chute system. There's a hatch like this on each landing, and people can put small bags of rubbish down the hatch and they end up in large BPHA bins down on the ground floor. That system worked fine for many years until they designated this block as social housing and moved in the cretins. I should explain, I don't mean that people who live in social housing are necessarily cretins. There's nothing wrong with being poor. I spent all of my childhood being poor, and depressingly I'm spending most of my older life being poor. But what I mean is people who are relentlessly antisocial, who don't give a damn for other people, and who are typically pouncing off the state, giving nothing to society, and spitting in its eye in exchange for all the benefits they get. That's what I mean when I say cretins. So yeah, with the rise of the cretins, these chutes stopped working. They would jam up with the pizza boxes and mattresses and stuff like that, which any normal person would realise can't go down these chutes. And those signs, of course, are entirely worthless because cretins don't read signs. So the chutes become blocked. People who would put their rubbish down the chutes find they can't, so they leave their rubbish on the floor, which then gets to stinking, and on and on and on. And this again is part of the normal regime of existence and has done for decades since the cretins came. Oh, and by the way, BPHA bills me for the unblocking of these chutes. The cretins, of course, don't pay bills. This is the communal area on the ground floor where you're supposed to take rubbish which doesn't fit down the chute. That requires effort, which is why the cretins don't do it, of course. One of the service reductions I've seen is that these bins are not emptied anywhere near as quickly as or as often as they used to be, and the area is not cleared at the weekends in the way that it used to be. So the rubbish just mounts up where it stinks and constitutes a fire hazard. It's really an unlit bonfire. BPHA don't see a problem with that, though they do see a problem with residents having doormats in front of their flat doors, because that constitutes a fire hazard. The next service I'll talk about is caretaking, which is to say keeping the building clean and tidy. It's worth pointing out perhaps that my criticism is of BPHA, not of any individual employee. The cleaners in my experience seem to be decent people working hard, but the services are not what they should be, and that's BPHA's fault. BPHA have published this schedule which explains the work they say they do. Well, let's just look at a couple of items. Skirting boards cleaned fortnightly. These skirting boards look to me like they've never been cleaned. and quite a number of skirting boards are entirely absent. Paintwork wiped down fortnightly. Well, the paintwork on the landings is this textured stuff and it can't be washed. So it accumulates the miscellany of scuffing and gobbery you'd expect from cretins. It could be overpainted, of course, but it hasn't been since it was originally done. The foyer and the stairwells are painted in a paint which can be cleaned, but I don't think it's ever been cleaned. Certainly not fortnightly. And just to be clear, perhaps head off some excuses, it's not because the paintwork's old, it's just not cleaned. And the reason it looks so disgusting is quite simply because it's never cleaned. There's a lot more I could say about declining services, but this video is already 11 minutes long, so I just want to move on to increasing costs. As this graph shows, several things happened around 2009. The really obvious thing is the curve on top, that's caretaking, and it shows that over the period of about 4 years, caretaking costs doubled. Same caretaker, same cleaning schedule, or less, double the price, no explanation. The schedule of work already provided by BPHA doesn't really help because it doesn't tell you how long each of these tasks takes. So I asked them to tell me. This will certainly be information they already have. It's common practice in cleaning organisations to get this kind of thing done. It's how you scope out work and quote for contracts. So it's not unreasonable. Oh, except it's very unreasonable. It's true that I've spoken to Shire and Denny's before about cleaning, but I've never asked for this information before, so I don't know why they wouldn't provide it to me. So I got a spreadsheet and made some what I hope are reasonable estimates and came up with the conclusion that I'm being charged for half a caretaker, but actually it's only taking a quarter of a caretaker, so I'm only getting half the value. Not only that, for half the effort I'm paying twice the price, and not only that, a number of these items on this list, as far as I can see, are not being done. And BPHA won't discuss it with me. The other thing that happened in 2009 was the great unbundling. A whole slew of new items started to appear on the service charge bill. It was explained to me that this was just a mechanism whereby they were making more transparent the services they provide. They took them out of an overall charge called caretaking and put them in individual categories. However, when I pointed out that therefore if that was all that was happening, the total charge would remain unchanged, their head of housing management, George Parkinson, who is a female by the way, had no explanation. Window cleaning is one such example. That became a separate charge in addition to the caretaker charge, even though the caretaker at that time, a guy called Pete, said he'd always clean the windows himself. They'd tilt and turn, he swung them inwards, cleaned the outside, closed them shut and cleaned the inside. And that didn't change when the new charge came around. So, new charge, no new service, no explanation. The most recent formal complaint I've made to BPHA was about the caretaking service levels and the charge. Here is a response from their manager of complaints, Jane Simpson. Pause the video if you'd like to read it, but the gist of it is, we're done talking with you about service charges. Your next step is with the Ombudsman. But then she continues like this. On a related issue, we note your service charges are in arrears. What she should have said is, on an entirely unrelated matter. That is correct, the arrears are real, but BPHA and I disagree about how things came to be this way. I believe I had their permission. They're denying that. I might make another video about that, but what's interesting here is the context. This is a dirty, down and dirty threat. Stop making trouble, by which she means holding us to account, or we'll crush you. Actually, BPHA have already crushed me. The quality of my life has declined horribly. My self-esteem has collapsed. Stress, anger and misery are with me daily. The area this building sits in has been run down, and so has the building itself, to the point where my flat is now worth so little that if I sold it I couldn't afford to buy anywhere else to live, so I'm trapped. The Housing Ombudsman is looking like a 5-star arsehole, so I don't anticipate being able to look to them for any help. If anyone's got any ideas for ways I can improve this situation, then please leave them in the video comments. If you're in a similar situation to me and you're looking for help, then why not join me? If you subscribe to this channel, then you'll get updates and videos on related topics. If you join the Facebook group, then you can contribute and learn there along with the rest of us.